front pages as usual. Everyone's going on different stories this morning. Sunday Telegraph's got some pictures from Guantanamo Bay there, but also the George Osborne story that you were hearing about in the news there. Mail on Sunday has gone for top stores being attacked for allowing people to gamble while they're shopping online. The Observer has an interesting story we're going to be talking about a little bit later on, talking about how younger people are now just going to have to rent rather than buy houses. The world has changed for them. Lots and lots of football, of course. Roy Hodgson, no sweat, says they gave you the Sunday Times before. They've also got a story about judges being told to get tough on immigrants. That is what we are going to be talking to Theresa May about as well. And finally, The Independent on Sunday has Eric Pickles, the Community Secretary, talking tough about problem families. And again, we'll discuss that with our two wonderful paper reviewers, the Huffington Post and the Times, Carla Buzasi, editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post.
Don't get that confused.
One day.
It may have gone by the time we get to there. And Phil Collins from the Times. We're going to start off with what story? Carla, have you got the first story?
We're going to my internet trolls. So this is in the Times, but it's a story that's been running actually for a few weeks now. Yeah. I think there's been some great TV programmes about it. Louise Mensch has come out and sort of exposed these people who were trolling her on Twitter.
But for those who don't understand the terminology, trolling is being unbelievably personally offensive and abusive while hiding behind anonymity on the internet.
Absolutely, yeah. And you see this you see it in comments on news websites, Twitter, Facebook, and I think it's becoming more and more prevalent as more and more people are on these sites. But we've finally got someone who's actually managed to get the police involved and forcing Facebook to reveal lots of people are saying identities. It's not the actual identities of the individuals, it's their IP address. So that's no guarantee that they'll actually find out who's been leaving these comments. But the law firm that have been representing this woman have basically said this is opening the floodgates, and we're going to see a mass of potentially lawsuits because of this.
Less anonymity on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Phil, your first story.
Well, it's hard to avoid the Spanish bailout.
Yeah.
I mean, critics of the European Union always say that the bad thing about it is there's this horrible plan towards federalism, and the truth is it's much worse than that. There's no plan at all. And we're lurching from one crisis to the next. So we're proceeding by summits, and the latest instalment in the slow rescue of the euro is 100 billion euros for the Spanish banks. Now, as you can imagine, that amount of money going to Spanish banks has gone down extremely badly in Spain. But it's probably still the case. I mean, Paul Krugman, I think, is right about this, that the euro was a terrible idea, but the letting it go would be even worse.
Right.
So another summit's coming up at the end of June, when the Germans will be prevailed upon again. Will they come forward with the capital to save it? And that still remains a central question. Does the German fear of inflation stop them from doing what they've got to do?
Well, they've got to do. And in terms of our economy, you know, these sums are just unimaginable. Here's another 100 billion euros for you. But is it the case that our politicians really have any control over what's happening to our economy, the lack of growth and so on, or are we just sucked into this vortex?
Well, we're sucked in to some extent. I mean, I think that France, Germany and the Eurozone as a whole has avoided recession, and we haven't. So you can't entirely attribute, as George Osborne's trying to do, the travails of our economy to the Eurozone, though of course it has an effect. I think at the moment the Tory party is about to indulge itself in the desire for a referendum about a fantasy, which is to say a Europe that doesn't exist, a common trading bloc without the institutions of the European Union, and they're calling for a referendum on this. It's like calling for a referendum on Narnia. So why they're starting this slow suicide is beyond me, but I think they're going to.
A lot of people would vote for Narnia.
Well, they would. It's a lovely place to live, but Andrew, it doesn't exist.
No, come on.
Sorry.
Come on.
I know it's early.
Watershed is a long time yet. Carla, you've chosen a story which is related to this, but it's about the human cost.
Yes, so latest figures are out and suggesting that, well, not suggesting, there's been a 10% rise in women over the age of 30 having abortions, and they're blaming this on the recession. Women are worried about their careers. More women are out of work than men since the recession started. And I'm always slightly worried when you talk about these stories because the pro-life lobby will seize on this, and there is indeed a quote in this story where they're saying, you know, women are just using this as a quick way of of getting rid of children, and I don't think anybody goes into that in a light-hearted manner, but yet another example of how the recession is affecting everybody on a very personal level in this instance. On a more positive way in this story, it's also saying that the number of teenagers having abortions has gone down. Yeah. So again, all the headlines, it's terrible, the number of young women having abortions, actually that is decreasing.
Interesting story there. And Phil, we have to talk about, this is the obvious, this is Douglas Alexander, Labour politician, on a slightly unexpected story.
Yes, it's always good to hear from Douglas Alexander on football, and that's what we've got in the Mail on Sunday. And despite the slightly lurid headline, the case he makes is a very considered one. I think he's right about it. And what he says essentially is that if players are forced to walk off the field because of racist abuse, then they should be supported. The first move will be to go to the referee and ask for intercession, but if the referee doesn't do anything and it's intolerable and a player thinks in all conscience, I'm not playing in these circumstances, and walks off, they'll be booked according to UEFA, but they should be backed. I mean, you can't play in those circumstances.
So this is really bubbling. We're going to talk to Clark Carlisle of the Professional Footballers Association a little bit later about that.
It started quite well. The first few games, it doesn't appear there's been any problem thus far.
This is another example, though. MPs are all jumping on this. This is a great issue to get behind at the moment. Yeah. And suddenly they're all...
Well, there's also a political question because, of course, Tymoshenko, the opposition leader in Ukraine, is after what was essentially a show trial, is in prison. Yeah. And the British government have got this slightly peculiar position where they're not going to go there for the group stages, but if England get through, they might go for the latter stages.
Really strange moral position.
As I understand it, and not being a football expert, that's more to do with the fact that if we get through, if those matches are in Poland,
will we move to Poland?
Then they wouldn't have so much of an issue attending.
Carla, your next story.
OK, so basically, if you're feeling a bit depressed, do not buy The Independent on Sunday today. Or if you do, make sure you've popped your Prozac first. So, headlines, celebrate your big day as if it's your last. This is figures that you're more likely to die on your birthday. Wars, disasters, pesticide and zombies. Is the end of the world nigh? This is everything that's going on in America summed up in one very depressing headline.
My guess is no.
And when your Olympic dream dies, you face the nightmare alone. Very sad story about people who win Olympic medals and then left bereft afterwards.
It is
true.
Of all the problems in the world, I think I could cope with that one.
Yeah, I know. For one reason or another, it has to be said that the Indy on Sunday has a very, very down feeling this morning.
It definitely does. So
they don't do any royal stories today, and I love them for that. So there's sort of the cockroach of Jubilee coverage, which is still going.
It's still going on.
They don't do that, so they have to fill it up with terrible stories.
Of course, a lot of these Sunday newspapers really don't have very many old-fashioned reporters left to go out and get stories. And, you know, they will be looking at organisations like the Huffington Post thinking, is this the... How many actual sort of journalists do you have now, Carl?
I have got 23 journalists.
23 journalists. There's a lot of papers who would love to have 20... I mean, and these are all reporting journalists?
So most of those reporting. We've also got a blog team, because blogs are a large part of the Huffington Post. So I've got 3 people on my blogs team, and there are about 3,000 people blogging for us as well. But that's more opinion-led things than reporting on the news.
So 3,000 opinions?
Yes, 3,000 opinions.
Wow, that's more than I've got.
Well, maybe this is the future. Another story, Phil, from the traditional end of the market.
Yes, the government's pull your socks up merchant, Eric Pickles, is using West Side Story to get into the question of problem families, the G Officer Krupke, the great song where they blame their parents and their background for everything. And he says problem families have had it far too easy. We need to stop being so correct about them and start hitting them a bit harder.
Not literally,
well, I think, I don't know, but I think the interesting thing about this, I mean, there is a serious problem, and what the government's trying to do is pay firms by the results they get. And that's the interesting thing from a policy point of view.
In terms of getting people into work?
Yeah, either getting them to work or getting children to read better. You set up some sort of measure, and then you only get paid if you improve things.
I think it's very difficult how you're actually going to work out a child's reading standards and pay someone for that.
It's difficult. The devil of this is always in trying to work out what is it that marks somebody's improvement. But it's not impossible. No. And it's intriguing that's what they're trying to do, because governments for years have tried to deal with this, they always call the problem families. There used to be 250,000 of them in one measure. Now there says 125,000.
And again, how do you measure that?
However many you get, they do commit a vast majority of the crimes. So it's not wrong to think there's a serious problem here. Now, whether he's got the right solution, I don't know.
We're getting close to our running out of time moment, so let's just crack through a few more. You've mentioned we've got both Cameron and Osborne up at the Leveson inquiry next week.
Yes.
Big week, actually.
It is a big week. I mean, we keep on saying with the Leveson, which seems to have been rolling on forever now, that this is the big week. But this is a pretty big week. You know, we've got Gordon Brown, we've got David Cameron up. And I think, you know, everyone's going to be watching on Thursday. Is he going to get tripped up? Is this going to be a serious conversation, or is this going to be about, what, you know, how text messages were signed off?
It'll be a really interesting few days. Phil, the renting story we've mentioned already briefly, but we should just acknowledge that many people are going to have to rent. There's a fascinating little picture there that you've picked up.
Yeah, this is the flag as it might look if Scotland were to become independent. And the interesting thing here is not only is the Scottish blue gone, but the Welsh dragon is inserted, because in the Union Jack as it currently stands, the Welsh is not included, because Welsh, they'll love this, was considered to be a principality and already part of England. But in the new design, there's a nice Welsh dragon in the bottom corner, which will be
This seems
lovely.
very sad when we've, you know, all our streets are festooned at the moment with the Union Jack on bunting, and that might be the end.
I know. Well, we've run out of time. Unfortunately, the sexual depravity of penguins is one of the stories that we are unable to bring you. You're going to have to read the newspapers yourself if you're interested in that.
I think there's a silver lining.
Thank you both very much indeed.